Mani Dugal, BPO Head Latam de TATA. Hello, Mani.
Hello, Lotus. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Well, you just came out from your conference
Yes,
talking about the customer satisfaction in multi-channel.
absolutely.
What's the key elements to have this satisfaction in multi-channel?
I think, Lotus, what's happening is, and like I spoke in the conference as well, what's really happening in the whole contact center space. That we've spoken about customer satisfaction for a very long time, how the customer is important, how we should do the right things for the customer. But what's not really happened is that the people who are actually making the calls, who are actually speaking to the customer, do they own the customer? Do they feel that this is my customer? So it's something what we say at Tata's is that every associate who talks to a customer for one of Tata's customer clients should feel that he is part of the client. So for example, if I'm as Tata, I am making a call for Citibank, the person on the phone should feel I am part of Citibank and not part of Tata. That's the way I can actually feel I own this customer. And I think that's really something which we believe is going to be the most important aspect. That how much is our contact center and our staff aligned to the end customer and to the client. So I think that's really going to be the challenge. And what we have been driving is that businesses, and this works both ways, both from customers as well as from contact centers, need to change the way they look at their own relationship. So it is not a vendor versus a customer, but it's actually a partnership. We are part of your extended team. So I think that's really going to be the change, and that one element of that relationship on owning the customer is what is going to be key.
And how can you communicate this culture, because it's a
It
culture,
is cultural thing, yes.
a culture, how to your people, to the agent, how do you do it?
See, and it's like you rightly said, it's a culture thing. So there is no one switch where you say, I turn this, flick this switch, and tomorrow it will start happening. It happens over a period of time. It is what we also call the way a relationship matures, but it works both ways. It takes time from actually from the client to actually invest in spending time with the team, how much you interact. It works with us actually driving it on the floor, saying that it's what we always say, that you might be a Tata employee by ID card, but at heart you are a customer. So I think a lot of that happens from a cultural thing. A lot of that also happens because of the way we interact. For a long time the contact center space was where you ran a dialer campaign, so someone gave you a bunch of stuff, you gave it, and end of the month you kind of did an analysis whether you did well or you did well. Well, what we believe is that you need to speak to the customer daily. You need to be part of their strategy sessions so that you understand what the customer and his business is driving towards, because then that is what you take back. So a lot of it comes from that interaction, a lot of it comes from changing the way the relationship works, that it's a partnership. We are an extended team. It's just that we don't sit in your office or we don't have your iCard, but end of the day we are your team. So I think a lot of that stuff in terms of the way we interact, the way we talk, the way we are aligned to the customer's targets, that's what's really going to change.
And how is the trend? How do you see the trends in customer experience in Latin America?
I think specifically in Latin America, if I look at it, and I think Latin America is coming up that curve now, because I believe, and I'll actually split this question into two parts in terms of what do we see from customer experience and what do we need to do as a contact center community to change that. I think one part is specifically from a customer's perspective. I think customers in Latin America are now becoming far more demanding than what they. I think so. It's in two parts. One part is I think the customer in Latin America is now becoming far more demanding than what he was, and I think that that is coming from the fact that the customer is now far more informed. He knows far more what his rights are, what he should be expecting. And I think, and that's a good thing, because the point is, the moment a customer becomes demanding, that means he's more willing to talk to you, he's more willing to engage with you, and which is the end of the day, as contact center people, that's what we want, right? That customers should talk to us, they should tell us what they want. So I think, and that's really going to the basic trend, if I were to just summarize it one. I think from our perspective, what we need to do as a community is, while we listen to the customer, internally we need to move away from that whole fact of our job is to answer the phone and talk to a customer. We need to build in more intelligence in terms of analytics. So if Lourdes calls me, and I know she's called me in the past, I would have a pretty good sense of why she's calling me again. So can I actually be able to build that conversation? So can I build that whole analytics stream into it? Can I bring in technology which actually helps me gauge whether she's happy on the call or she's not happy on the call, and can we bring in better monitoring? So I think a lot of technology needs to come in for us to be able to enable a much better experience for the customer, which I do believe is not where it should be. If I'll benchmark it to, say, a lot of the other global markets, I think there is a lot of work which we need to do to be able to do that. So I think that's basically the but the good part is the customer is becoming demanding, and I think it is good for us, because that will make us work that much more harder. Because if the customer gets demanding, then we don't have a choice but to start doing that much more.
And what's your opinion about Latin America as a region in contact centers now?
Latin America, I think, Lourdes, is, if I look at it and if I were to benchmark it again, and I'm assuming the question is if I were to look at it in comparison to other global regions, I think while we do a lot of good work from a customer, and I think a lot of the organizations which do contact center work, they do a lot of good work. I do believe we need to build a lot more consolidation, and be able to provide what we call a multi-site right shoring model. And here my emphasis is on right sourcing, not outsourcing, because I do believe we do not do enough work in terms of advising the customers on what to do and what not to do. And I think that's the biggest piece, because end of the day, not everything can be sent out. There are some things which are core to an organization which we would recommend that they should do. There's some things which we can do very easily, and that's all. So that is one. The other is something which we always call, and it's more a manufacturing terminology, but I love to use it in the contact center space, is that what is the manufacturing side and what is the IP, the intellectual property. So it's always been in the contact center space is that the intellectual property, which is the strategy, who to call, when to call, was always with the customer, and we would do the calling. So we would be like manufacturing side. So someone's made a strategy, we would just implement it. What we see globally happening is that a lot of that IP is moving from the customer now to the vendor. The reason for that specifically is we talk to the customers every day. So we know the customer better than anybody else. So logically we should be able to do that. And I think that's what's really I think that's the future in Latin America as well, is that as we start doing that IP has to start moving to us, where we actually get into a mode where we can tell the customer that I think this is the right thing for your customer, because I've been speaking to your customer for the past 5 years. So now I know him. So I believe this is what you should do. And I think that's one thing. But on the other side, I think the one thing which we do very well in Latin America, and it's a lot of the time, is that we have presence. Any of the larger players have presence just about across the region. So our spread is very good. And I think that kind of helps us get down to the path, because when you look at a lot of the other regions, there are not very people who have a regional presence. You will only have a local presence. So if someone is in UK, he will not have presence across Europe. He will pretty much be in UK. You don't have that kind of global presence customers, which I believe is a strength in Latin America. And the other thing obviously is, I think language is since the entire region apart from Brazil speaks Spanish, I think that's a big advantage which we have, which a lot of, so from a contact center service provider perspective, I think that's a big advantage to be able to build a footprint across the region.
Okay. And how is TATA in the share market
Okay.
in Latin America?
How is TATA in this? Sorry?
What is the share market
Okay.
of TATA in
See,
Latin
I think-
American region?
Okay, so for example, for Tatas, see, we've been in this region now for 10 years, and the person who heads Ankur, who's the chief operating officer for Tatas in Latin America, he's been in Mexico for 10 years, and I think and I do believe he's more Mexican than he speaks Spanish, his kids speak Spanish, and so I think, but I do believe that's primarily because of the kind of potential which Tata see in Latin America and the kind of investment we've been wanting to make. So today we are about 10,000 odd people, and I think our biggest strength in this 10,000 odd people is that 98% of those are locals. So yeah, they are Latinos working here, and that's something which we've consciously gone ahead and said is, we don't want to get people from globally into the region. They can come in and teach us what we should be doing, but at the end of the day, this is the Latin America, the Latam region, and it has to be by the Latinos. So that's, and out of the 10,000 people, we have close to about 3,000 people now in the BPO space. Contact center for us is still fairly nascent in Latam. We're not that big. We do operations out of Uruguay. We do some operations out of Argentina. We are doing some out of Guadalajara now. So it's fairly nascent, but we generally part of the thing of me being here and we're getting a lot of people here is that we see a lot of potential in this region in terms of growth. Even if you look at any of the market research reports by Forrester or Gartner, Latin America is the highest growth market across the region. So for us, we would like to believe that, for TCS, we always call ourselves TCS Latam because we like to separate ourselves because that's our identity and that's our investment. And but rest assured, what we really want is that this is going to be our focus area now for the next at least 5 years. And so that's that.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you lots.